Equities, they kind of look like the best thing around at this point, but they're down today. Nonetheless, this next very famed investor expects the S&P to move positively into next year.
Marc Faber is the editor and publisher of the Gloom, Boom, and Doom Report, and he joins us now. Good to see you.
Yes, nice to see you. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
First of all, the news from Germany. Are you surprised? And how's it going to affect the markets?
Not really, but I think eventually they'll come to some kind of a compromise. And there'll be some kind of money printing one way or the other.
What do you think it is that they oppose within this draft?
Well, I think that, when the EU came about, the regulation was actually, or the agreement was 3% maximum fiscal deficit and government debt to GDP maximum 60%, and practically every country broke it. And unless there is an authority that can really punish people who break it, it's not going to work. It's kicking down the can further and further, and the problems get bigger and bigger. Because if you look at the US has intervened into the free market since the S&L crisis, and each time the crisis grew larger and larger and larger. And I think that's a big problem. But I happen to think, they're going to continue to print money.
The US is a collection of states. Europe is a collection of nations, and to do what you were suggesting means that some nations would have to give up what they consider to be their own sovereignty, to give up their tax policy, their fiscal policy to a union. Are they willing to do that?
I doubt they are willing to do that. I very much doubt, so especially not to the Germans.
But just
and also, you have totally different mentalities in Greece and in Portugal and Spain than you have in Germany and so forth, so you have also a different historical background. And so I think actually personally the best would be to dissolve the EU.
Whoa. Okay, hold on. That's news. Marc Faber saying dissolve the EU?
Yes, this is the best. Let the market sort this out and let the countries default. And it's going to be painful, very painful. But rather than to again intervene into something that is not going to work in the long run, I think it's the wrong medicine.
How do all of those bets, all of the transactions that have been done in euros, how do they, because if in fact Europe dissolves, each country will have its own currency, each currency will be valued its own way. How are you going to work out all those euro bets?
What you can have is like in the world. I can travel anywhere in the world and pay in dollars. Still, maybe in future not. In most countries now, the euro is actually a better currency than the US dollar. But all I'm saying, you could have dual currency. Say in Greece, you have the local drachma, and a lot of transactions still occur in euros or in dollars. And that, the same is in the whole of Latin America. I pay in dollars in Latin America. So I never exchange any money.
You could keep the actual euro as a currency.
And say, keep the euro for the strong countries. There's only one strong country left, essentially. Well, no, the Netherlands and Germany, and that euro would then be a very hard currency. It would be a strong currency. And the local currencies, they would have all to be devalued, and they would all have to default. But I think sometimes it's better to default and take the medicine than just to pretend that there is no financial problem.
Do you think there is the will to do that? Because this is so far we still have these people saying, well, there's the IMF since the European Central Bank is not officially allowed to bail out countries. That's part of their original agreement. They'd have to pass that money through the IMF, which is frankly a kind of a shell game, isn't it?
But look, if I were Greece or Portugal or Spain, I would say bye-bye. I exit the EU. And the debts in EU, that's your problem. It's like Connolly, the former Secretary of the Treasury, he always said, we have a problem with the US, but it's a bigger problem for you.
Hindsight's 20/20, but when the whole idea of a European Union was floated, did you believe that it was destined to fail, or did you believe it could work?
No, I think if they had kept the agreement, 3% maximum fiscal deficit and government debt to GDP 60% maximum, it could have worked.
If there were teeth to say
But you have to ask yourself, why didn't it work?
Right.
What do these bureaucrats in Brussels do besides eating well and sleeping the whole day? And, sharpening their pencils? They're precisely the useless bureaucrats that have brought about the financial crisis worldwide.
So this may end up being a painful but very useful exercise in getting rid of the notion that bureaucrats can control these economies?
Look, we know very well what is the best model is a capitalistic system and a free market. And what has happened is more and more interventions came into the free market through monetary and fiscal policies globally, not just in the US, but everywhere. And so it distorts the market with artificially low interest rates. You created first the Nasdaq bubble, then the housing bubble, then a commodities bubble. And because there are leakages, you created now a bubble in Chinese properties.
Yet you feel right now that it's U.S. equities that are a decent bet? Would you say you're putting more allocation into that area?
Well, actually, I'm surprised the market is still where it is, because don't forget, on October 4th, the S&P dropped to 1,074 from 1,370 on May 2nd of this year. And now we're still, say, at 12.30 today. So we're still way above the low, and I think that low of October 4th will hold, and that we will get a year-end rally, and that the rally can extend somewhat, because somewhere, somehow, the central banks will agree to print money. It may not be called QE3, and in Europe it may not be the ECB that buys bonds, but they may do it through the IMF or some kind of other institution.
Marc Faber, what a pleasure to see you.
Well, it's very nice to see you, and I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you.
The New Year will be very happy for investors.
I think 2012 is going to be a good year.
No, but we will have, we will have a lot of volatility.
Marc Faber, Gloom, Boom, and Doom Report. Pleasure, sir.
It's
Please
not
come back
often you're in
again.
town, and we appreciate you stopping by Fox Business.